was hot yesterday. Who thought it was too hot yesterday? You guys need to move further north. It was pleasantly warm yesterday. Although if it's 95 degrees in August, you're all going to be saying, "Why is it so hot?" We're not satisfied. I'm doing a series called what? A series of unfortunate events. And despite the title, most of the stories that we're going to be talking about is not just unfortunate events. But today what I'm going to be talking about, the initial situation in which this individual was put in was not of their own making. And this person dealt with something called hopelessness. And hopelessness is a terrible, terrible feeling. To think that there is absolutely no hope whatsoever is beyond what we can really bear, because there is absolutely no hope. There's this feeling that nothing is worth it, even yourself, and things will not. They do not perceive things ever being able to get better. That's what hopelessness is. There's no way I can get out of the situation I'm in into a better situation. And hopelessness is so tragic because people don't truly understand it. I read this quote and I really like this. If your only possessions are an empty wallet and hope, it is far better than being roommates with hopelessness in a gold-filled mansion. If money could make you truly happy, no rich person in the world would ever be discontent. And yet, we know there are a lot of rich people who are discontent. Not only that, there are a lot of extremely wealthy people who've committed suicide. But I have never, ever met anybody or heard of anybody who had hope that committed suicide. Because hope is so important. Now, most of us, in listening to my voice, of seeing me, you probably will say, well, Pastor Steve, I'm not hopeless. I believe there is hope. But maybe your perspective right now isn't that things are completely hopeless, but there's very little hope in your situation. I got some good news for you. And we're going to find out what those good news are at the end of the message. For now, we're going to look at a woman who felt hopeless. She was a servant from a distant country. She was a maid, slave. She was forced to bear a child and marry a man to appease somebody else. Yeah, this is in the Bible. She was treated extremely harshly for doing what she was told to do. And she ran away, having no hope. And that's where she finds herself. In the wilderness. Not being a lot of hope. And if you haven't figured out, this lady's name was Hagar. Somebody guessed it right. Hagar. I'm going to be honest with you. Give out prizes. I will make the hints a whole lot harder. I have never actually preached a sermon on Hagar. I know that people have. You don't hear it very often. Usually, she's part of a larger story. And she is part of a larger story here. But I want to focus on Hagar because I think she embodies what a lot of people, even a lot of people in the church, are struggling with. So let's read her story. Genesis chapter 16, verses 1 through 4. Now Sarai, Abraham's wife, had not been able to bear him children, but she had an Egyptian servant named Hagar. So Sarai said to Abraham, "The Lord has prevented me from having children. Go and sleep with my servant. Perhaps I can have children through her." And Abraham agreed with Sarah's proposal. So Sarai, Abram's wife, took Hagar, the Egyptian servant, and gave her to Abram as his wife. This happened 10 years after Abram had settled in the land of Canaan. So Abram had sexual relations with Hagar, and she became pregnant. But when Hagar knew she was pregnant, she began to treat her mistress, Sarai, with contempt. So let's understand the situation, okay, in case you don't know the situation. 11 years prior, God had told Abram, he hadn't changed his name quite yet. Abram, he says, "I want you to go to a country I'm going to show you, and I'm going to give you a lot of descendants." And when he got to that country, he saw the land, and God says, "I'm going to give you all this land." Abram said, "Okay." Years passed, and Abraham didn't see a whole lot of production, either by children, descendants, or land possession. And so God, in chapter 15 of Genesis, and I preached a message on this, and maybe you should go back and listen. God cut a covenant with Abram. If you don't know what cut a covenant is, go back and listen to the message. I don't want to get into it right now because I don't have time. He cut a covenant with Abraham, and he guaranteed Abraham what he was going to give Abraham. And then, not long after that, in our Bibles, one chapter. I don't think time passed by chapters in real life. I don't think it does. But what we find not long after that is he is now kind of distressed. Not only him, but also his wife, Sarai. She says, "Okay, God says he's going to give me children. I don't have any children." And so she decided to do what most of us, I would say all of us, has done. We tried to help God. Because we know more than God does. And we know how it's supposed to play out. And that's what she does. She says, verse 2, "The Lord has prevented me from having children. Go and sleep with my servant. Perhaps I can have children through her." As I read that in my prep, a full sermon came into mind just on that verse. I don't have time to do that because this is not what that message is about. But to say this: God, I can't see how you're going to do it, so I know better than you do how it's going to happen. Understand that she is well past bearing children age. She's still close, kind of. It would not be a complete 100% miracle if she had a child right now. But when she does end up having a child, it is a complete miracle. Maybe that was part of the point. She got impatient because she didn't want to wait for God. And we do that. We can't fault her, okay? But her impatience led to something terrible. Her impatience led to sin. You know what? When you get into a hurry, it never turns out as best for you. I've been building cabinets in my kitchen. We're still in the middle of this kitchen remodel, and I'm too cheap to pay somebody else to do it. So I'm doing it, and I'm in the process of building cabinets. And the other night, I think it was Friday night, I was working late. It was, about 9 o'clock in the evening, and I wanted to get a couple of things done before I called it a night. So I wanted to speed up the process. So I'm cutting some wood on my table saw. And I'm in a hurry. So I push the wood a little too fast. And there's a whole lot that could go wrong with that. One is if you're pushing it through there, you have a fence over here and a blade in here, it gets caught in between there, it could kick it. And I've seen a kid get hit in the head with a 2x4 because he was in a... For me, it wasn't that drastic. What it did do, though, is it splintered the wood that I was trying to cut because I was pushing the wood too fast. If I would have just taken my time and just nice and slow, no splinters. We get into a hurry and we make things worse. Could you accomplish it? Maybe. Could I accomplish what I wanted to do when I was in a hurry? I did. Did I get the result I wanted? No. And you know what I had to do? I had to get a new piece of plywood. And I had to cut it again to get the result I wanted. Whenever we try and do things in our timing and our God's timing, we end up having to redo it God's way anyway. Proverbs 5 and 6 says, "Trust in the Lord with all of your heart. Do not depend on your own understanding." Don't depend on the way you think it should be. Seek his will in all you do, and he will show you which path to take. Psalm 27:14. Wait patiently for the Lord. Wait. We are the most impatient people in the world. It's society in particular. Isaiah 40:31. But those who trust in the Lord will find new strength. They will soar high on eagle wings. They will run and not be weary. They will walk and not faint. Those who wait on the Lord. That you could also translate that word, not just trust, but also wait. Here's a simple lesson that we need to take from Sarai's decision. And that is this: a delayed promise is not a denied promise. Waiting is not wasted when God is the one who spoke. Let me say that again. Well, let's throw that image up there. A delayed promise is not a denied promise. Waiting is not wasted when God is the one who spoke. When you are waiting, understand that sometimes there are things that God needs to do that you are not aware of. Jeanette and I, before we moved up here, I had sent my resume out to several churches. And I tried to manipulate circumstances to get my desired result. I didn't want to wait. We lived in Douglasville for about a year. I didn't want to wait a year. I wanted to get back into ministry as soon as possible. Luckily, God did not allow my impatience to lead me somewhere else. And that's what happens sometimes when we don't allow God's timing and we force our timing. Not that God can't work with it. If I had pushed the issue and went to another church, do I think God would have been able to use me in that church? Absolutely. Do I think I might not have been satisfied as I am here? Probably not. It's not that God's going to take all of your joy away when you make a poor decision, but maybe, just maybe, you have a little bit more joy when you follow God's path instead of trying to force your own path. So what we find, Sarah decides that she doesn't want to wait. And so she decides to give her maidservant to her husband as his new wife and have a child. Now, this was not unheard of. Call it surrogacy. Somebody else has a kid and they have a kid for you. This was actually a common practice for women who were rich, who couldn't have their own children. They'd, in essence, buy a slave and have the slave have the child for them. It wasn't unheard of, but it's not God's plan. And what it started is a series of sins that saturated everything. Verse 5, then Sarah said to Abram, "This is all your fault. I put my servant into your arms, but now that she's pregnant, she treats me with contempt. The Lord will show who's wrong, you or me." Abram replied, "Look, she is your servant, so deal with her as you see fit." Then Sarai treated Hagar so harshly that she finally ran away. Listen, when we start down a road of sin, it saturates everything. So we see Hagar becomes pregnant, and then household tensions go out to just elevate. I mean, it just erupts, the whole household tension. You have this slave who was content doing what she was doing. And you have her mistress who was not content with the promise God had made her. That's what it was. God said, "I'm going to give you something." And she just didn't want to wait, so she's going to make the decision. And Hagar is put in a situation where she is told what to do. Now, we don't know whether Hagar wanted to do it or not. We don't have any of that. But what we do know is the decision was made, the transaction was finalized. It was not in God's plan, and sin erupted. And for the most part, most of the decisions that was made after that in this story were terrible decisions. I want to when Abraham replied, "Look, she is your servant, so deal with her as you see fit." It kind of goes back to what he said to her. Sarah said to Abraham, this is verse 2, "The Lord has been me for having children. Go sleep with my servant. Perhaps I can have children through her." And Abraham agreed with Sarai's proposal. How many people remember what I talked about last week? If you shake your head no, I'm going to point you out. No. Adam had a big fault. What was his fault? Well, I'm not going to put it that way. What he did was, he did not stand up for what is right in God's eyes. He allowed somebody else to determine what was right. And Abraham did the exact same thing. Abraham knew that God had promised him and Sarai children. And he was trying to, allowing Sarai to manipulate the situation. And by nature, also manipulating the situation. And she gets pregnant, and she finds out when she's pregnant that now she is looking down at her mistress as Sarai. She's looking down at her because somebody who couldn't have kids you just look down on them. What kind of sin did they do? Why can't they have kids? Are the gods angry with them because they did something? And so there's this harshness between the two women in the household. Both of them married to Abram. I would say poor guy, but he chose it. what Hagar did was not correct. Her attitude after all of this was not correct, but it also is not surprising. When you find something, when you criticize about something, your response, right or wrong, is usually not surprising. If you spend a lot of time with someone, you can pretty much tell how they're going to respond in any given situation. Okay? My beautiful wife she could probably, if you give her a situation in which I'm put in, she could probably tell you exactly what I'm going to do. Because I am, if nothing, consistent about how I do things. That doesn't mean she agrees with the way I handle things all the time, but she knows how I'm going to, because human nature is observed. You can tell how people are going to react if you know them well enough. And it should not be surprising. Either Haggai or Sarai's attitude about this situation should not surprise anybody. That doesn't make it right. It should not surprise anybody. Why? Because what sin does is it grows. It saturates everything that it comes in contact with. Proverbs 14:12. There's a path before each of us that seems right, but it ends in death. The Bible's pretty clear about what brings on death. What is it? Sin. So you could pretty much say there is a path before each person that seems right, but that is sin and ends in death. Galatians 6:7. Don't be misled. You cannot mock the justice of God. You will always harvest what you plant. If you are planting sin, guess what? Don't be surprised when sin pops up. James 1:14-15. Temptation comes from our own desires, which entice us and drag us away. These desires give birth to sinful actions, and when sin is allowed to grow, it gives birth to death. In the years that I was doing construction work, I had several instances on job sites where we were supposed to just come in and we were supposed to do a kind of a facelift. Do some sheetrock fixing and paint it. And we were doing this bathroom, and it happened several times. We're working in this bathroom, and we had to take this mirror down. And it's a huge mirror. And so we take this mirror down. Come to find out, and the homeowner didn't know this either, that behind that mirror, there was a big hole in the sheetrock, which I assumed, that's why they put the mirror up there to cover that hole. We take that down, and we see this big hole, and on the other side of this hole is mold. Now, if you know anything about mold, if you catch mold quick enough, and it's just on the surface, chances are you can take some bleach and you can wipe it and you can clean it up and you can kill it. But if left unattended, it not only stays on the surface, but it starts growing within the material itself. The sheetrock, now they have some pretty good mold-resistant sheetrock now, but 2x4s. And so we ripped the sheetrock, and sure enough, we pulled that sheetrock down. There had been a leak in that for I don't know how long, and there was just mold everywhere. And when it gets to the bone of the project, when you get inside the 2x4s, the only thing you can do really is rip it all out and put new stuff in. That's what happens when you don't deal with sin right away. And this is what happens in this story. There's a sin that starts and it wasn't dealt with. It wasn't dealt with, and what we see is more sin and more sin. First, it was just Sarah and Abraham deciding they're going to do it their way and not God's way. And then he takes another woman as his wife, and there's a lot of debate on whether that was a sin or not a sin. I don't want to get into that. To say this, we know it's a sin right now because God did not ordain it. It was ordained by man, and he was not happy with it. And instead of resolving the issue once it was made known, now we let our emotions get involved, and it goes downhill. Hagar looks down on contempt with her mistress because she feels better than her mistress because she's pregnant and Sarai's not. Well, Sarah's not going to she's not letting that happen. So she goes to Abraham, says, guess what, Abram? I'm not happy because she's not treating me the way I think she should be treating me. You got to do something about it. And you know what Abraham does? The godly man, the man who was justified by faith, you know what he did? Oh, Lord, give me wisdom on how to deal with this situation. Nope. Oh, by all means, I know you're emotionally high right now and you are not happy, but by all means, use your emotion and make the godly decision that you can make. And so what does she do? She makes life unbearable for Hagar. And Hagar runs away. She runs to the wilderness by a spring, and she's there. All because they allowed sin to remain. Listen, if we allow sin to remain, it will grow and saturate every part of our lives. If undealt with, we allow it to remain, it will grow and saturate every part of our lives. And not just our lives, but the people around us. I have a friend who was a youth pastor for many years. Part of a couple of churches that he felt that they didn't handle situations correctly, and eventually just stopped going to church altogether and pulled his wife and their daughters out of church also. And to my knowledge, I haven't talked to him in many, many, many years. To my knowledge, they're not going to church. And if they have a relationship with Jesus, it's not very evident. Again, I don't know a whole lot. I see some posts on Facebook, but that's about it. I don't think he wants to have a whole lot to do with me. We got to be careful because when we start down a road that is paved with sin, it's going to saturate every aspect of our life, and it's going to affect other people in our life, and not for the good. Abraham's silence is part of this tragedy. Sarai's harshness is part of this tragedy. Hagar's suffering is part of this tragedy. But let me tell you, God is not absent from tragedy. And we see this in this story. Genesis 16, 7 through 12. Now remember, Hagar ran away. She's out in the wilderness. She's crying. The angel of the Lord found Hagar beside a spring of water in the wilderness, along the road of Shur. The angel said to her, Hagar, Sarah's maidservant, where have you come from and where are you going? I'm running away from my mistress, Sarai. She replied, the angel of the Lord said to her, return to your mistress and submit to her authority. I'm going to stop there for a minute. I wasn't going to say anything here, but I need to say something. And this is running from a situation without hearing from God first is the worst thing you can do. Then he added, I will give you more descendants than you can count. And the angel also said, you are now pregnant and will give birth to a son. You are to name him Ishmael, which means God hears. For the Lord has heard your cry of distress. This son of yours will be a wild animal and untamed as a wild donkey. He will raise his fist against everyone, and everyone will be raised against him. Yes, he will live in open hostility against all of his relatives. It's interesting that what God promised Hagar is the same thing that he promised Sarai. You know what he did not promise Sarai? He didn't promise her any land. He promised that to Abram. The only thing he really promised to Sarai, which, by the way, it was promised to her because she was Abraham's husband, was many descendants. I said husband, didn't I? We don't believe in that. Wife. Sarah was promised many descendants. This is the same promise that was made to Hagar. Now, it is said in research within the Bible and outside of the Bible indicates that maybe not all, but a large majority of the Arab descendants, or the descendants of him, were Arab of the Arab nations. That's neither here nor there. The thing is, she's in distress. She's in a less than hopeful situation. Less than nothing. She had less than nothing. Not only did she have nothing, and this is where less than nothing is. Not only do you have nothing, but you have no hope to gain anything, ever. She's out in the wilderness, running away, and has no hope. Pregnant, has no way to support herself. And she's trying to figure out what she's going to do. Maybe that's where you're at right now. You're in a situation, not a lot of hope. You know that God has everything under control. You know that ultimately it is not completely hopeless, but you are out of answers, and you're like, God, what do I do? It could be anything. You could have found yourself in a financial situation that you weren't expecting, or even one that you made yourself. You can find yourself in a relationship that's not going how you planned it. And you're like, I need to get out of this relationship. What do I do, God? Or maybe it's work. You hate your job. You hate your boss. You hate the company you work for. But you see no way out. Hagar was giving a promise and a presence. And this is the same thing that God gives to all of us. He gives us a promise and a presence. Psalms 34:18 says, "The Lord is close to the brokenhearted. He rescues those whose spirits are crushed." And we know, Psalms 138, 1-3, "O Lord, you have examined my heart and know everything about me." I don't know where you're at, but you need to know that God sees our hopelessness, but doesn't leave us there. He finds us and gives us a promise and a presence. For Hagar, that promise was descendants. That presence is what we read about in verses 13 through 16 of Genesis 16. Thereafter, Hagar used another name to refer to the Lord who had spoken to her. She said, "You are the God who sees me." She also says, I have truly seen the one who sees me. So that well was named Bir Lahoya Roy, which means well of the living one who sees me. It can still be found between Kadesh and Bered. So Hagar gave Abraham a son, and Abraham named him Ishmael. Abraham was 86 years old when Ishmael was born. Hagar realized that her situation was not hopeless because there was a God who sees her. Hebrews 4:13. Nothing in all creation is hidden from God. Everything is naked and exposed before his eyes, and he is the one whom we are accountable. I had a lot that I wanted to say this morning because of just the nature of what we're talking about. But I also wanted to give ample time because I know there are people here who are in a situation where you just don't have the answer. Sure, you know that God has the answer, but God, could you help out a little bit? Could you give me some indication? Maybe it's a relationship. Maybe it's a job. Maybe it's finances. Maybe you are feeling helpless and hopeless because of our national situation. God wants you to know that he sees you, that he cares about you. He knows every feeling you have been dealing with. The hopelessness, the helplessness, the hurt, the pain. He sees it. I'm going to pray, and I'm going to open up the altars. Paul's going to lead us in a song. The words won't be up here because I don't want you singing this song, just be singing this song. What I want you to do is I want you to be in prayer. If you want God to do something in your life, if you need God to do something in your life, find a place at this altar and let him do it. Don't let pride get in your way. Satan doesn't want you coming down here because what it does is it allows you to be vulnerable and open to God. Can God touch you in your seat? Absolutely. But what I have found is people who stay in their seat only open the door a little bit. How wide are you going to open the door for God to reach into your situation and into your life? James 4:8 says this, come close to God and God will come close to you. Heavenly Father, we love you. And we know that far greater love you have for us. The decisions and the choices that we often make seem to pull us away from you. But God, help us. You look into our situation. Look into our pain, our hurt, our hopelessness, and move. Bring comfort and healing. To renew our sense of hope in who you are. We love you. We ask you. Now come, find a place at the altar and let God work in your life. Before I dismiss everybody, I want to say two things as we leave. The first is, don't let your circumstances define your God. And we have a way of looking at things despairingly. There is nothing about this life that God can't change and doesn't want to. He wants to. So don't leave here hopeless. Don't leave here feeling like there's nothing that can be done about your situation, because that is a lie from Satan. The second is James 4:8. I read the first part of that verse, and it said, "Come close to God, and God will come close to you." But there's more to that verse that I feel obligated to read, and it says this: "Wash your hands, you sinners, purify your hearts, for your loyalty is divided between God and the world." What that means is real simple. Don't ask for the answer from God if you're going to look at the world to find it. Draw close to God, but do it with a pure heart, with the right motive, seeking His kingdom. And when He challenges you to change something, probably a good idea to change it. Heavenly Father, we thank you that you are the God that sees us. You're the God who sees our heartache. You're the God who sees our hopelessness, our helplessness. You're the God who sees our uncertainties, our pains. And you offer hope. You offer direction. You offer a sense of love that we can find nowhere else. So, God, we cry out to you that you would go with us, that our hopelessness would be turned to hope, our helplessness would be turned to you, and that we would live this life the way that Jesus says we should, abundantly, with full life. We thank you. We love you. We ask this in your name. Amen.